Well, Razorback fans, Arkansas got some really good news over the Memorial Day weekend. DJ Wagner is a Razorback. So what does this mean for John Calipari as well as the rest of the Razorback basketball team? We'll talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of the John Nabors Show, which you can catch every weekday afternoon from 4 to 6 on Natty State Sports and nattystatesports.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with right now new customers getting $150 in bonus bets with every and any $5 winning bet. That's $150 with any $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I know a lot of you who are watching and listening, you're probably like, this is quite distracting. But yes, I am here at the beach and trying to get a little bit of a getaway for the Memorial Day weekend. So hopefully everybody had a great one, and hopefully everybody can not be so distracted. But I wanted to have a nice little backdrop for everything that we're doing down here. So either way, I appreciate everybody listening in and watching in. But a lot of things have developed, and we'll talk some Razorback baseball here in just a little bit, too, because obviously postseason play is revving up, and we know where Arkansas is now officially going to be as far as regionals go, what their seed is, the type of teams that they're going to be playing or potentially could be playing. But there was some big news that happened just over the weekend, and it was actually on a late Saturday night as the Razorback men's basketball team got another commitment, this time from transfer DJ Wagner. For those of you who may not be aware or you've been living under a rock, DJ Wagner played at Kentucky this past year. And it was, at least broken, the news was, by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette of Richard Davenport. And so he chose Arkansas over USC, Florida, as well as other programs. Now, according to On3.com, Wagner was the top available point guard and the number 51 overall player out of more than 2,000 entrants into the transfer portal. Now, we know that Arkansas has already got a really, really talented transfer class coming in. Of course, John L. Davis being the number one ranked transfer portal commitment, not only just for Arkansas, but in general. He was the number one transfer portal commit. But Wagner was up there as well. And if you look back to where he was as a high school player coming out, he was, again, depending on which outlet you look at, he was the number one overall player in the country. He had 28 starts this past year for Kentucky as a true freshman, where he averaged just a shade under 10 points at 9.9, 3.3 assists, and 1.9 rebounds a game, and he was also doing it in around 26 minutes per contest. He also posted 13 double-digit scoring performances throughout the season, including back-to-back stretches in November in which he scored 22 points on St. Joe's and a career-high 28 points against Marshall. He got off to a red-hot start on his debut campaign in the SEC, where he had 14 points at Florida, 16 points at Missouri, 18 points at Texas A&M, and that was all in his 3 games. He's 6'3", 185 pounds, and he was a consensus 5-star, which means that if you are one of those outlets that may have a guy that's a 5-star, but another outlet may have him as a high 4-star, that you could go either way. But when it's a consensus 5-star, that means every single reputable outlet had him as a 5-star. He was also the co-MVP of the McDonald's All-American game back in the 2023 class, where he had 19 of his points, all of his points actually, in the second half. And he was going to be, according to a lot of the NBA mock drafts, a second-round selection in 2025. And also, I think this is kind of a cool thing. This is according to NattyStateSports.com. Wagner is the son of the former Memphis star and NBA player DeJuan Wagner, and the grandson of Louisville legend and former pro Milt Wagner. So a lot of basketball happened in his family, and he comes from a great, great family of high basketball IQ as well as a high basketball talent. And so now you have 3 players from Kentucky, where you have Big Z, who transferred in, as well as Adu Thiero. And then you throw in also the players that were coming out of the high school class for Arkansas. That's where you have Ol Wagner. Now, here's the thing, folks. A lot of you are going to have your own reactions to this. Some of you are probably not surprised by it because if you've been reading some, like NattyStateSports.com, for instance, or you've been listening to Curtis and Scotty, you'll know that they felt really good about DJ Wagner and the potential that he was going to have of ending up being a Razorback. I know that we all get impatient. We all start saying, hey, we don't want to wait any longer. We don't want to deal with this anymore. We want it right now, and we don't want the labor pains. We just want the baby. And so it kept building and building and building. But what I thought was really fascinating about it is that not only did it take a little bit, which we'll never know the true story behind it, but DJ Wagner did not take the social media to announce his decision. We see that all the time in this day and age, especially with high-caliber high school players, high-caliber transfers, high-caliber everybody. We see so much go on where people start wondering, when's it going to happen? Well, just wait until they tweet it out or wait till their Instagram post comes out or if Joe Tipton puts out a graphic for them that he went through and then it comes out that way. He didn't post anything. And in fact, according to Matt Norlander, he made it very clear and very apparent that he was not going to do that. He was not going to post anything about it. I may be overlooking it or maybe making too much of a deal out of it, but I really respect that out of DJ Wagner. You know, this day and age with so much social media going on and people love the attention that they get. Like we see so many times, players that may not got enough of attention coming out of high school, or maybe they're just used to all the attention because they're such a high-caliber player that they just feel like, well, I got to put out a post, so that way I get a bunch of retweets and I get a bunch of interactions, and people start talking about me and hyping me up and talking about how great I am, and I get a bunch of follows from that fan base of the school I'm going to. Like, everybody starts freaking out about it, and I will admit, as a 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, there is something to be said about that attention that gets paid to you. You start to kind of live up for it. You start to enjoy it. You start to kind of, shrug your shoulders a little bit and say, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Feeling pretty good. And DJ Wagner didn't do that. And in fact, who knows? He may have been committed to Arkansas for a long time now, which I think if you just kind of look at the silver linings here, or at least the in between the lines, it looks like he has been. But when it was going to be officially announced, don't know. I mean, now it is, and it's being reported as that. But because we get so much of our information from players and potential players about when they're deciding to commit, and we do it from their social media accounts, when they don't do that, you hear the reports, you're like, okay, that's great, but are we sure? What if somebody jumped the gun here, and they're not committing? I don't think that's the case with DJ Wagner. I just think that he is that type of player and that much focused on the task at hand, which is, of course, getting to Arkansas, playing for John Calipari once again, and being one of the elite point guards and developing here into this next season. So we already knew that Arkansas had one of the more talented rosters that they've had in quite some time. We were just talking about NBA talent itself. You can look at not only the guys that they got out of the transfer portal, but even out of the high school class. I mean, you're talking about 3 players that are coming out of the high school class that are bona fide McDonald's All-Americans. I don't know if all 3 of them are one-and-dones. I'd be pretty surprised. But they still are all consensus 5-star players and McDonald's All-Americans, and that alone, to me at least, is worth being excited about. So you add those 3 guys into the mix, and then you get the guys that were at Kentucky that you already saw what they did under John Calipari. And then you throw into the mix of a John L. Davis, which I can't express enough, folks, how excited I am for John L. Davis. Like, all these players are great, and I'm really excited about the team and assembling it. But to me, the John L. Davis addition was the guy. You needed that dude where if you're down by 2 points with a minute left to go in the game, give him the ball and get out of his way. That's what I've been looking forward to the most for him. And Arkansas has that. So with the high-level high school talent, the high-level transfer talent, and the familiarity of the high-end talent that John Calipari had over at Kentucky with the transfers coming in, I mean, how do you not get excited about this? How do you not feel great about it? Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. And I'll even take it one step further. I saw John Rothstein of CBS Sports tweet this out, and I really respect him and I respect what he does, but I've always felt like if you have national guys on board with what you're doing, it doesn't always mean that it equates to success, but it means more coming from them than it does me, for instance. And John Rothstein said that he's looking at this Razorback roster, And he feels like this is a top 10 team right now next year. Top 10. You got to get it done in the season, of course. You got to get it done in postseason. And we know after this past year in basketball, just because everyone hypes you up doesn't always mean it works out. But I at least feel good about the job that John Calipari has done here in the offseason of assembling a talented enough roster to get you to a national championship. There's still work to be done. There's still some additions that's going to be made. But to me, he's done a good enough job, and I'm excited to see the direction that it's all going to go. We'll talk a little baseball, and then we'll get back into basketball here in just a second. But folks, it's a winner-take-all time right now in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Let's talk a little baseball, Razorback fans, because you know that you went 0-2 in barbecue in the SEC tournament. I mean, I don't really care. I literally could not care less about the record or anything that you do in the SEC tournament. But we all felt good that Arkansas's chances of being a national seed was extremely high, and lo and behold, that's what they got. Officially, for the Razorbacks, they are going to be the number 5 seed in the NCAA baseball postseason. So, for those of you who may not be aware of how it works in postseason play for baseball, if you are a national seed, aka a seed 1 through 8, that means that not only do you get to host the regional, but if you win that regional, you will also be the host of the super regional the next weekend, unless you're, Missouri State, who ended up having to, have their ballpark being used by a AA team. It doesn't matter. That was years ago. But still, doesn't matter for Arkansas because if they find a way to go through the regional, they'll be hosting for the supers. So what is that going to look like? Well, since Arkansas is the number 5 overall seed, which that was the same seed that they were in 2018, just saying, they will be hosting 3 other teams, and at least in the first game for Arkansas, which will be at the 2 p.m. matchup on Friday. That's what Dave Van Horn always has done. He's always chosen the first game of the regional. They'll be facing off against Southeast Missouri State at 2 p.m. at Baum-Walker Stadium this Friday. Southeast Missouri State's 35-25. And then the other 2 teams that are in the regional, it sounds like it's on paper it's going to be difficult, which I'm never going to say it's easy. You never know with these college baseball postseasons. But you have number 2 Louisiana Tech, at number 2 seed in the regional, I should say, at 45-17. Louisiana Tech's been a program that's had a lot of success. They have been a national seed at times. And I think even last year they were I couldn't remember if they were a national seed or not. I guess they probably weren't because they were actually faced off against Arkansas in the supers in that regional, but we know TCU went on. But either way, it doesn't matter. They're a really good baseball program that has been in a position to host before, but they didn't this year. They're 45-17 this year, and they are going to be facing off against the final team in the Fayetteville Regional of Kansas State. Now, Kansas State is 32-24. The Tech and Kansas State will be facing off at 7 o'clock there on ESPN+. All these games, or at least in these few games, are going to be on ESPN+ here this Friday as well as Saturday. And then after it's all said and done, Arkansas, of course, is double elimination. Got to say that, too. It's going to be double elimination. And if Arkansas is able to find their way through that and make it to the supers, they will be matched up against the winner of the Charlottesville Regional, which is hosted by Virginia. A little familiarity there when it comes to Virginia. Virginia is the 1 seed out of that, and they will be facing off against Penn, not Penn State, Penn of the Ivy League. And also Mississippi State, an SEC team, is going to be the 2 seed in that regional, facing off against St. John's, who is the 3 seed. So Arkansas has got to get through their regional. Of course, we all know that. But if they do, the potential that they'll be facing a familiar foe, at least historically with Virginia, or possibly a familiar foe in Mississippi State, a team they play every single year, and a team they played this past year in their final SEC series at Baum-Walker Stadium, which Arkansas won in Game 3, which was really stressful because Arkansas was down early and had to have a serious comeback. That's what it could be looking like for the Razorbacks. So what does it mean? So, that's kind of the deal. It's like, what does it mean? What is it going to do as it kind of gets darker out here? I didn't even realize how dark it was looking. But what does that mean? Well, essentially what it's going to be is that Arkansas, when it comes to a draw on paper, I feel good about this. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I'm not saying that there's no cause for concern that Arkansas is just going to walk right into Omaha. I'm not saying that. But I definitely feel better about this draw than I did last year for Arkansas, than I did the year before for Arkansas, and even better than what I did in 2021. And the key for all that is always about Dave Van Horn and how he approaches the draw. Does he say it's a really tough draw? Because if he says that, odds are it's going to actually be a tough draw, and you may not feel good about it if you're a Razorback fan getting out of the regional. But still, I think Arkansas, for all intents and purposes, I think it's about as good as you could ask. I think it's about as great of a concept and as great of a matchup as you could have, at least in the supers, potentially. But we know what the goal is. We know what the end game is. It's Arkansas getting back to Omaha, but that's how it's going to be laid out, and those are the teams potentially that they could end up playing throughout the postseason. So Arkansas just has to go take care of business, and they got to get it done first and foremost. We'll talk about some other basketball news, which I thought was pretty fascinating here, and kind of just looking at it from the perspective of a former player, which was honestly kind of surprising and also pretty important here in just a second. But before we do, I want to tell you folks about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive, because eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and leveled up to peak performances, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're using speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million car parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need and at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that huge win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Trevon Brazile, which y'all all know Trevon Brazile. He played at Arkansas for the past 2 seasons before transferring there from Missouri. Had a really great start to his sophomore year until he got injured through the season, and was going to be a key part of this past year's team's experience and their talent, but it just never panned out. But either way, he entered into the NBA draft, and then he also entered into the transfer portal, kind of keeping his options open. I kept thinking like he was going to go to the NBA. It seemed like it was the most logical thing. It seemed the thing that makes the most sense. And also, I thought potentially he had everything that he needed to get to that point. But instead, this was happening actually yesterday. Jeff Goodman of the Field of 68 reported that Brazile's agent, Daniel Hazan, said that he is withdrawing from the upcoming NBA draft. And this was back in April when he declared, but he's saying, you know what, I am coming back. In fact, Jeff Goodman wrote, he said, the 6'10 forward is extremely talented and is making a smart decision per multiple NBA executives. So apparently whatever the NBA executives are saying and everybody, they're like, nah, you need to go back. So he is going to be into the mix. He measured at 6'9" and a quarter inch without shoes, and also weighed in at 215 pounds and had a 7'3 3/4 wingspan. And he had the 5th best max vertical leap for all players at the event for 41 inches. So we know how freakish of an athlete he is, but it looks like he's going to be not going to the NBA. So here's the thing, is like when I saw this, and I know I was more joking about it than anything, but immediately when I saw this, as well as everybody else's reactions, like, oh, would he come back to Arkansas? Would he come back to Arkansas? Here's the thing. I don't know. I don't think so. I think Cal maybe just wants to go across the board, like, hey, let's start fresh. Anything and everything that maybe was on this team before or had played for this team before or whatever, Let's move on from it. I think that he could absolutely be taking that approach. And if he does, that's fine. That's the approach that I would want to take. I want him to handle it and be the team that he wants to be. But if Trevon Brazile decided that he wanted to come back, and if Calipari said, you know what, I would love to have this guy as part of our team, and it all worked out, I absolutely, twice on Sunday, would take Trevon Brazile back. Wouldn't even think twice. I would take him back. But that doesn't mean Arkansas has to have him back. Arkansas is going to be just fine without him. Just fine. But if you told me you added him, I wouldn't be against it. In fact, I'd still feel pretty dadgum good about it too. But that's just me. But hey, I appreciate everybody listening in and watching in to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at the John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you then.